Welcome back to the Four Pillar Podcast, where we stand for faith, family, fitness, and finance in that order, baby. And today we are talking about the power of decision making and making decisions and the key to making decisions and how do you do that, and maybe even talking about some of the decisions we have made and how to put those items together to make critical decisions to help you move forward in life, in faith, family, fitness, and finance, and how to deal with maybe big decisions and how to not to get a decision backup or decision overload as well too, where I feel like some people can get stuck in a part of not making decisions and struggling to move forward with things. What do you think?
Yep. Yeah, when we were discussing what topic to talk about on the podcast, Ian brought up decision making. And at first I was like, I don't really know what I would have to say about that. I mean, it's a good topic. But then last night, kind of stewing on it, I'm like, that's a really good topic. Because the 4 pillars, like when you're making a decision, especially a big decision, you have to think about the 4 pillars. But I also think, what's the term? It just escaped me. The something paralysis, like a decision making paralysis.
Analysis paralysis.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah,
I can't even say.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
I think it happens a lot for people.
Yeah. I kind of get stuck in the what ifs and end up prolonging and creating anxiety around certain things. So I think this is a really good topic.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to overcome analysis paralysis as well too. And sometimes with that, it's just getting up and walking away from your problem as well, or something you need to make a decision on and not overanalyze it. But before I guess we get into that as well too, let's talk about what is the essence of making a decision.
Why don't you answer that first, Ian?
Well, what do you think it is?
The essence of making a decision?
Yeah, what is the essence of making a decision? What's the definition of that?
You put me on the spot. I would say an obstacle in your way, and you have to decide the consequences of that decision that you're going to have to make, and what the outcome will be.
Yeah. And if you ultimately break down making a decision, it's choosing a path, or it's choosing, really it's just, you could say choosing, and it could be choosing an option, choosing whatever, but affirmably choosing something that you're going to do regardless of and or accepting the all consequences of that choice. Now, when you say consequences, like consequences don't have to be a bad thing.
Right.
There are what I would say good consequences and bad consequences. Everything has a consequence, but they don't, like, I think when you hear consequences, they go all bad, but there are good consequences to things as well. If you make for example, if you choose to smoke cigarettes a pack a day for 50 years, there's a pretty good consequence that you're going to get lung cancer.
Pretty bad consequence.
Yeah, like a bad consequence.
Good chances that that's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So accepting that things you choose to do, you're accepting all those consequences. And same thing, if you choose to make a decision to exercise on a regular basis, you're going to probably have the consequence of actually feeling better.
Yeah.
And so there are always good and bad consequences for everything. I think that's kind of what I would say the essence of decision making is choosing a path or choosing an option or choosing something and agreeing to or accept, I shouldn't say agreeing to, accepting all consequences with that choice that you make.
Yeah. I think the hardest decisions too are when there's not a good or a bad decision to be made.
Right.
It's like there's no wrong answer here. I think those are the toughest decisions to make.
Yeah.
But I know we'll touch on that later.
Yeah, we'll get into that too. I think we should talk about what's the easiest way to make decisions on things. Like what would you think that would be?
I think Well, number one is prayer and seeking out the Bible. I think the more you know God through the Bible, the more confident you will be when you're faced with having to make decisions because you have that confidence. And then
Right.
I think I I guess it's hard for me because like my first thought was picking a spouse because you have to make a decision if
Right.
this is going to be the person you live with. So I'm going to use that, or the person you're with forever.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use that as an example. Like if I'm deciding I'm dating, I'm deciding if this is the person I want to marry, first I go to the Bible and pray. Second, I would seek good Christian mentors who are honest with me. They're not going to just tell me yes because they want me to be happy. It's more those hard questions. Do your values align? Blah blah blah. And then I just think you you just have to make a decision and go with it and trust God, and you put your whole self into it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was very good. And that's what I was getting at. And you said go to the Bible, pray about it. So what I would correlate that to is saying have values, a compass, and non-negotiables.
Yeah.
And so if you know those things, you automatically can probably make a good 70-ish, if not more, decisions. I mean, pretty like instantly without having to think about them because you have rules, laws to yourself. When I say compass, I mean like you could say morals or whatever, but
Yeah.
I like to use the word compass because if you have like these things that point you in a direction, you stay away from other things or know where you're going. So it's easier to make decisions on things. The same thing with like values. And we get those things from somewhere. We either ponder those things, I guess, out of meditation, read about them from other people, or essentially the most powerful ones is you give your life to Christ, and God gave you commandments and a very, I would call like the Bible my compass. It's a very easy compass that tells you exactly I mean, not even potentially, it tells you exactly how to live a great life and make, I mean, a majority of your decisions based off of the items you're supposed to conduct yourself and compass yourself along according to the Bible. And it takes away a lot of stress out of some of the decision making.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is we're not promised a good life in the Bible, but we're
Well,
promised eternity if we
correct.
live within his will and everything. I just wanted to clarify that because
Yeah,
it doesn't, we're not promised a good life if we follow the Bible. I
right.
mean, look at Job. Like,
Yeah, but did I say
yeah,
promise? I didn't think I said
you
promise.
said a good life.
Yeah,
I
well,
don't know if you said promise,
yeah,
but
well, it gives you exact directions and compass how to live a good life. It is in there,
yeah,
but we're not promised that it's
right,
going to be like rainbows and butterflies and be easy by
right.
any means. Because even if you go, I like using Proverbs, which I know is in the Old Testament, but Proverbs, if you go through Proverbs and if you've ever read any self help book, and a lot of the self help books, like you look at Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, James Allen, As a Man Thinketh, I like if you almost find it, you point out a self help book essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those like older generations of people that put that stuff together basically took, I mean, almost you could almost like they took principles out of the Bible and put their own wrapping paper on it,
Right.
right? And if they didn't get it, per se exactly from the Bible, they took it from somebody in the 18th century, the 17th century, the 16th century. And if you actually go look up that person, they will actually have pulled probably most of their philosophy from reading the Bible. And that's kind of
Yeah.
the cool thing about it is basically any self-help stuff you find, it those principles and values and things are basically, I believe, talked about in the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
if not in the New Testament. I mean, I love Proverbs because Proverbs gives gives you a almost well King Solomon was the wisest man in the world. God gave him everything, gave him all the wisdom in the world, and so he basically writes what that is. And what we also find out as well too, I mean, he kind of messed up quite a bit as well too, and was enjoyed life like too much essentially as well, and had everything. And he essentially tells you what he learned from that, or what God gave him, and all the wisdom, and how to. I mean, literally, it says he had all the wisdom, pretty much almost all the wisdom God gave him, and he had everything in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, and that's written in the Bible.
Yeah,
He tells us about it. That's pretty powerful, I think, and especially if you go through and you read it and you really think about all the things. It basically, some of the verbiage may be a little bit different than like what a modern person may take and like say, or
right.
like I said, they take it and put a wrapping paper on it,
Yeah,
essentially. But it's all there, right there in the Bible.
yeah, absolutely. I think another factor with making decisions is keeping eternity in mind. And that means just keeping heaven in mind and why we're here on this earth.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I didn't know if you had anything else to say to that. You can keep going.
No, you're good.
With we got a little distracted there. I can't remember where we exactly were, to be honest. With I said something about, we were talking about making decisions. Oh, the more making a how to make decision, the essence of making a decision,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where you have to sit down and put together, right, your non-negotiables, your compass, your values, which are, like I said, I feel like you should take those, from what God tells you how to live your life, and it is the number one goal is to ultimately serve Him, and He promises us eternity and to serve Him, and that should be your main focus when you're looking at those things. But once you have that set up, you can pretty easily make decisions on things. For an example, I'll use for just different things that come up. So like one thing for the gym that we had, and this is even before Kylie and I got married as well too. I basically more or less kind of was. I more or less was like, I'm never going to work on Sundays. I mean, it's not perfect. When I say work, there still might be something you have to do, as far as like we take time to plan our schedules on Sundays, so that involves, you could say, some kind of work, because we're looking at what's going on for this week, for the business, for our family, for everything. So there are some exceptions with little things that you do on Sunday. But when I say work, is I never ask any of my staff to work on Sundays. There's been maybe a very, very rare occasion where we had a dinner, or they've had some sort of special chamber event or something that I believe we went to like one time. It's been very rare on a
Yeah, I
Sunday.
don't even remember.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
been
they
very
can choose
rare.
to work on Sunday if they're like a personal trainer, but
Right, but I
yeah.
never require anybody to work on Sundays, and I'm not going to work on Sundays. And I basically accepted that, because my most important thing that God tells us to do is to serve and honor and glorify Him, and go worship with fellowship with people. So every Sunday is our church time, and work's not going to get involved in that. And plus, if God rested, then I would think it's essential He wants us to rest as well too,
Right.
because He made the earth in 6 days essentially, and then rested on the seventh.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it's okay for He wants us to rest as well still. So by doing that, I automatically know if someone says, "Do you want to have a open house or attend something on Sundays?" or "Hey, I have somebody that wants to do an intro or do something on Sundays," I basically don't even have to think about that. My answer is
Mm-hmm.
no.
All right.
But what time are you available on Monday or Saturday or any other day of the week that I'll make it work for you? And that's just an example of how you can minimize stress on decisions about stuff like that.
Yeah. Um. So you talked about like the non-negotiables, and what else was it that you
Like
non-negotiable?
non-negotiable values, I just call it the
Yeah.
compass.
So let's say somebody.
Compass and values are, you could say, almost kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I'm just going to use an example, and I want you to kind of break it down. Okay.
Yeah.
So somebody has let's just say, a husband got a job opportunity, and he has two young kids at home and a wife, and his family lives around him, but he's going to make double the amount of money, but they're going to have to move like 3 hours away. So kind of just break down what that would look like in making a decision like that.
Yeah. So I guess we're kind of moving on to our next, you could say, section then.
Oh,
Like
I'm
with
sorry.
no,
Yeah.
this is good because I wanted
Okay.
to do this. But now we've kind of covered, right? You can establish those things, and it kind of creates your framework for making decisions. So now the next thing comes into actually making a big decision.
Yeah.
So it's not just, hey, do you want to come into work on Sunday to help me finish this project? Answers automatically no. This is an item that is going to cause dramatic change, evolution, or circumstances in your life that you need to make a decision on. If you say yes or no to this decision, it's going to have great impacts on either one of the four pillars, right? Faith, family, fitness, or finance. Because when you take decisions into consideration, you should think about faith, family, fitness, and finance, and the impact it is going to have on those pillars. So sorry. Repeat the circumstance like one more time.
This is actually why I kind of made up this circumstance, because so it's a young man with a wife and 2 young kids, and their family lives around them. He got a job opportunity to make double what he's making now, but they're gonna have to move 3 hours away. So there's not, to me, this is why I made I made up this scenario. There's not a bad decision here.
There's not a bad decision there.
But for this scenario, again, totally made up. They have a good church. They're plugged into it.
Mm-hmm.
He likes his job he has now. It's just a better opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you break down the 4 pillars and the non-negotiables? Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't.
There's a lot that goes into that because you don't know this gentleman's framework for his life, right, and what he values.
He's made up. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, I know, but you got to think about if this is you, right, making this kind of decision. If whoever's listening to this, and you're thinking about what's your framework for life, like what do you live by? And another thing to think about is what are your goals and things going on in your life, because circumstantially it may be a good idea for that family to take that opportunity and do that based on what their goals, where they're at in life, things like that. Maybe their parents are still younger, so they're only going to move away for so many years and come back, right? There's a lot of variables that you should think outside the box when making this decision. Now, I am going to give you a framework that I use to make decisions that I think is very helpful. I'm actually going to give you 2 frameworks. One is a little more simpler. The one takes a little more work, but it actually, I think, makes the water almost crystal clear sometimes with making decisions. So the first thing I believe you always should do is you should always journal. Okay, let me preface: prayer is the most important thing. I'm not mitigating that or going past that. You need to pray about decision, ask God for guidance, strength, and wisdom, and just an ounce of wisdom to help you do, and that you're going to be a good servant, king, and leader in whatever you do, and that He's going to guide and direct you in your life for your family. But after you do that, you need to, I think you should journal about it. So you can, or if you don't journal, pull up a piece of paper and just write about it. Write about the opportunity. And I'm not even giving you a real strict framework, but I'm literally just write about it. Write about what's currently going on. Write about like what the job's going to give you, what's going to do. Write about how it's going to change your life. Write about how it's going to affect all aspects of your life. And that can really help you. What you'll notice is when you start doing that, you'll actually start thinking through a lot of things. And when you're just writing, you'll start having a question come to your head, and you'll start you'll start having ideas pop in your head of how maybe we can do this and that. And then it stimulates your thinking process. So that can be very helpful, if not get you there. The other thing is that I started doing more recently, especially with bigger decisions, is I mind map everything. So what I do is I basically draw a circle and I put what that thing is. So this example is it's basically taking a new job, right?
Yeah.
Is the main thing. So whether to take the job or like taking a new job, right? And that's a circle. So what are your, basically what you do is I'm very visual, so that's why I like this, but you'd have a big piece of paper, a whiteboard, and in the circle you'd have, in the center, basically take new job, right? So what are your options to do for this?
Just backing up a little bit. anytime you do this, I'm sitting down with you. So in this scenario, he has a wife. His wife would be with him.
Yeah, well, and obviously too, you can do this. I think it's even beneficial to do this by yourself and then do it again with your spouse,
like
depending on what the circumstance is. Or if you own a business and maybe you have, like for me, I have a general manager. She's absolutely amazing young lady, but she helps me make a lot of decisions to help grow the business. She's very involved with the stuff that we do.
Yeah.
So even if you own your own business, you could do the same thing and take that to that person and ask them for their opinion to help you with that. And you don't have to do that obviously as a business owner, but that's what I like to do. I like my staff being very, very involved.
Absolutely.
But sorry, am I staying on topic? Right? You asked for,
so
you said spouse. You said sorry, they have a spouse.
They have a spouse. So you suggested doing it alone and doing it with your spouse, because I think your spouse will come up with things that maybe you didn't think about.
Correct.
Especially if maybe he wants to take the job and she doesn't want him to. I think doing this mind map together really helps.
Yes. But so basically, right, you put that circle down, take new job, right, in the center of that circle. So now you make 2 sticks. Well, there could be 3 sticks off of it. Could be 4. There could be a lot of sticks. But depends on the decision, right? This one's probably going to be pretty easy, right? So when I say sticks is like you draw like lines, right, from that center circle. So the reason I say this is like, so what are your options here?
Take the job or not take the job.
Yes or no, right?
Right.
So you draw 2 sticks out, and you put 2 more little circles there on those bad boys, and you put take job or not take job. Or if you just want to put yes or no, and you know the yes is I'm taking the job, no is I'm not taking the job. And the reason I say there could be a lot of little sticks coming off of this is because maybe it's not a yes or no answer.
Right.
Right. And so it's like you have to basically solve a problem for your business or for your family or whatever, and there could be like 5 sticks, right?
Well, in this scenario, maybe he takes it for a year, but his wife stays home, and so there could be a lot of sticks. It depends on the opportunity.
It depends on the opportunity. So maybe they analyze this and they're like, just like what you said, right? Is they go and they say, okay, we're going to buy a second house, I'm going to rent an apartment there. You're going to keep this house. I'm just going to move and work and drive back on the weekends. Right. And that could literally be like another stick off of this. Right. So basically whatever you want to, whatever decisions you can make with said problem or decision, you make a stick off of it. Right. Yeah. But we're just going to keep it simple. We're going to say yes and no. Okay. So your next 2 options are yes and no, right?
Yep.
They're yes and no. So off of yes and no, right? Then you go what else could happen?
Off of the, I can't really think of much for off the no, but off of the yes, it would be obviously more money, more opportunities for that. It depends on what the job is, but there could be some growth, personal development for him. For the no, I can think of reasons, but I can't really think of if he doesn't take the job, nothing changes a whole lot. Right. So I can think of reasons not to take it, but I can't think of maybe consequences to not take it.
And so that's what you think about, right? Is you basically just keep mind mapping it, right? Until you get down to there's nothing, nothing left per se, if that makes sense. So if there, so like, what did you say the yes was?
More money is the biggest thing.
Yeah, so you could basically put your sticks off there and then put more money, move away from people. Like you could kind of start putting off like stuff that could happen, essentially off those sticks, and you just kind of keep going until you kind of have like all your essentially your opportunities or things that could happen, right? Mm-hmm. And then what you need to do is, so the reason you mind map it is, right, so you have all the possible solutions or things that could happen off of your basically your decisions, right? So for this one, you have 2 main core decisions, yes or no, right? Now the last thing you do is you got another piece of paper or you erase this whiteboard or flip the whiteboard over. If you have a double flipping whiteboard like I do, you just
It's
flip,
so fun.
just flip that bad boy over, and you make a pros and cons list for every single situation.
Yep.
Right. So for yes, it's like, yes, I take the job. Right. So you're going to make a pros and cons list if you take a job. Right.
Yeah.
Then you do another one. If I do not take the job, I'm going to make a pros and cons list. And if there was like 5 decisions, right? If you had 5 little sticks coming off there with circles, you have to do 5 pros and cons lists.
Yeah.
And then, well, as you notice, that yes and no, right? The pros and cons list are going to be very similar ish. There's going to be reversed in how you look at them, right? If that makes sense. So it'd be like, I'm going to make more money, but so for example, you said yes, right? The pro would be, I'm going to make more money. The con is, don't get to see family as much, not his wife and kids, but his intermediate family. Then if you were to go to the other pros and cons list, was if you didn't take the job, it's like, right, the pro is I get to see my family, but the con is I don't make more money. Right. So a lot of them are going to be similar, which is fine, right? But you'll notice when you do model pros and cons lists like that, you're going to have outliers, right? You will find differences in both the pros and cons list and something, and that is what you're paying attention to, right? Is how many pros, how many cons, and then you'll realize that one or the other will have a different outlook on maybe more pros or more cons, and then you compare them and you make a decision based off that. And this is where you still kind of ultimately have to compare and look and make a decision and go, because you could go, well, if there's more pros than cons, like obviously for an example, right? If it's like 50-50 with like pros and cons, like I think pros and cons can have weight to them as well too, right? Like one could be hold more weight than like another one, right? So just having more pros than cons doesn't always means it's the best decision potentially. But however, if that list is like 50-50, or like if the list is like slammed with a bunch of pros and not that many cons, I mean, you should probably lean towards choosing that option depending on what those things are. And I think that's what makes decision making so hard, is because there's not a 100% correct answer, and there's not 100% advice that someone can give you. You have to you can ultimately take those tools and analyze something and make the best decision you possibly can, but there's no way to know the 100% exact answer.
Yeah. Sorry, I feel a sneeze coming on. One thing I've noticed in doing this in practice is that the mind maps is very logical, and the pros and cons can get, I don't want to say
be a little more emotional.
Yeah, more emotional. And I'm a very emotional person, so I try to put that to the side when I'm making decisions. But a pros and cons list can really help with breaking down what you really are feeling and what you're thinking about something, and help your brain clear out maybe some of those emotions.
And I think you have to be careful making decisions on emotions. However, though, you have to also use your emotions to make decisions, because God gave us emotions and made them all have special abilities and things to do inside of us. And honestly, I've changed my opinion on this a little bit as I've gotten older and more experienced with things. And honestly, it's stuff that I've reflected on myself. Like, well, if I would have logically thought about this, I never would have actually accomplished X, Y, Z. Well, to some extent, right? Because I just went off of a whim of like, I'm just going to do this. And we're going to make it work, and we're going to accomplish this, right? Logically, was it the right thing to do? Absolutely not. Horrible idea, probably, if you were to logically break it down. Horrible idea. But it allowed me to accomplish something otherwise that I wouldn't have been able to do. For an example, I can't remember the gentleman's name here, but even if you look at a lot of people in history, and people that have accomplished great things or made like crazy decisions, if they would have probably logically thought this out, it wouldn't have worked.
I think that speaks a lot too when people doubt you too. You can believe them, like my mind went to somebody trying to train for the Olympics. So somebody doubts you and they're like, you can't do it, or that's going to be too hard. You're not going to have the time to do it, whatever, XYZ. If you believe them because you're thinking like logically, like, oh, I have a family, I have a job, like I can't, I don't have enough time in the day. Like, but if you have that confidence, which is emotional, then you can accomplish stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. Uh, so a couple things. Well, too. Sorry, I wanted to look this up because I just want to make up something. So, but like for an example, if you think about, there's actually two main ones that comes from. You probably heard the thing of burn the boats,
Oh, yes.
right? You got to burn the boats. So this is what I say. We're like taking logical reasoning, right? So in 1519, Hernan Cortez, I should be pronouncing that correctly, which was really a Spanish conquistador, right?
Conquistador.
Conquistador, same thing. I don't speak Mexican very good.
Yeah, stop.
They arrived in Mexico, right, to basically check the region out, do all that good stuff, and they were basically wanting to like take this or conquer it, right? And it was the Aztec Empire at this time. There, I can't remember the exact specifics on it, but this is me paraphrasing. You can Google it if you want to be that exact about it. But basically, they had like, I want to say they had between like 5 or 10,000 men or something like that, and they numbered the Aztec Empire to have millions of people, right? And basically, they're at this point where he's like, "We're going to take this, right?" Because one, they were like basically had no supplies, reinforcements were like going to be taking forever to sail, because obviously they had boats back then. You couldn't just fly from Spanish to Mexico, or Spain to Mexico, or wherever they were or whatever they were doing. So he basically said, we're going to take this. And so he burnt all of his boats. So they could not retreat, right? They were either going to conquer the Aztec Empire or they were going to die. And so he made it very clear their objective is they're taking Mexico over. They're killing all the Aztecs, and that's what they did. They conquered the whole entire Aztec Empire, because you could say the phrase comes from the history, burn the boats. And it also happened again with Alexander the Great in 334 BC with Alexander the Great as well too. When he was leading one of his conquests, he got burned his boats when he, I believe it was, read my notes here, and yeah, when he reached Asia, so they could take over, no turning back. And so, like, right, that's why I kind of wanted to bring that up, because if you're using logic to make decisions, right, like if you're thinking you had 10, like, right, if I told you this, if you had 10,000 guys and there's like 2 million Aztecs, and like you need to go take over these cities, like logically, was that a good idea?
No.
Absolutely not. Horrible idea,
Yeah.
right? But he did it.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. As I gotten older, I've used emotion in making decisions a lot of different, because that's how you, I think, accomplish more greater things, with that belief, enthusiasm, and faith as well too.
Absolutely. That was a much better example than mine.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, sorry. No.
So that kind of gives you a little framework of how like I've used in my life to make decisions. I think Kylie has as well too, and us as a couple. And that's really been the most impactful thing that I've done. Is, like I said, journaling, and the mind mapping and then pros and cons list is super powerful. And really, the next thing too is just take action on stuff. Like some stuff too, you're never going to make a perfect decision. Depending on what it is, if something comes up and it's really not that impactful, and I'm not saying small things don't mean something, but if it's not that impactful and it's something per se that maybe isn't that gray side of like, is it going to impact my compass, my values, or whatever. Like for an example, let's just make up and say our manager comes in and says, should I use heading number 5 or heading number 10 on my paper for this flyer, right?
Oh, can I? That's a really silly example. Maybe let's
Well,
say a merch thing.
Yes,
Something
sure.
like, what font should I use on this merch?
Right.
you could spend all day
looking at fonts.
looking at fonts,
What's the best font? That's probably a better example. Looking at fonts, comparing them, what's supposed to quotation sell the best, all this stuff, or you ultimately have to one redirect the thing back to them, or you just look up the best t-shirt font, or you pick like 3 of them and then be like, this one looks good, and then boom, go and move on with your life. Because right, that doesn't necessarily have that giant of an impact. It's going to change your life.
Yeah, I just looked up something. I really liked this from the first time I read it. At first, it didn't sit well, and the more I've thought about it, the more I like it. But it's if it won't matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes worrying about it, because I have a lot of like anxiety, and those kinds of things would put me in a tizzy for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think everybody struggles with that. With
Yeah.
you say decision paralysis.
Yeah,
Is
but
what I call it, and it's stuff too that isn't really that big of a deal, and it just kind of bogs you down and slows you down to hitting your goals. You just like make a decision and move on from it. And there's probably some of those decisions that aren't going to be as good or whatever, but it doesn't really, it's not changing your life or whatever.
Yep.
As in choosing to take a job or not is a big
Right.
life altering change.
Yep.
And the last thing I'll leave with you as well too is I mean, read any book, a lot of mentors have said this, and it's something that's always been beneficial or helpful, is never make a super big life changing, like big impactful decision if you are tired, stressed, or
hungry.
I guess you could say hungry. Actually, I think actually fasting and making decisions are actually more beneficial than being satisfied on a full stomach.
I've just heard that because people get hangry, but
Yeah.
fasting's different.
Yeah. So the big 2 things are like no sleep and like overly stressed about stuff or worried about items, which is hard because you're like, well, I'm always tired and stressed, and well, you got to figure out a time to relax and recuperate and take an hour and do a mind map and pros and cons list to make a decision and go.
And good luck if you have a newborn trying to make a decision and get some sleep and all that stuff.
Yes. But like again, it's never going to be perfect. So obviously, if you're a single mom, have like 5 kids, and you sleep 2 hours a day and whatever, like
my heart goes out to you.
Yeah, and sorry, you're right. You're gonna have to make a decision while you're tired and stressed. So that's just part of life. But still use tools to make decisions the best you can.
Absolutely.
So if you believe it, you can achieve it. We'll see you in the gym soon. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to give us a subscribe, like, all that good stuff. Please give us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Have a blessed day, everybody.